With this, I would like to move on to our next speaker, which is and covering the next topic, which is Configuration Lifecycle Management, a game changer in manufacturing. And for this, we have our co-founder, our Chief Strategy Officer, Henrik Reif Andersen, who has extensive knowledge about configuration lifecycle management, has been working with this for many, many years. And for this, I would like to welcome Henrik Reif to go through his presentation and his thought on how we can go ahead with the configuration lifecycle management, and based on your knowledge, and explain how this can be a game changer for and also get the performance achievements that we can expect from that. So please.
Thank you, Shahid. Thank you very much. And good morning and good afternoon to all of you. So I am going to talk about how we see CLM changing the game when it comes to handling complex products and services. But I'm going to start a slightly different place, and then I'll get back to the CLM part of it. And I want to start on this semiconductor shortage. It's a problem we have all heard about. And it has arisen out of a combination of high demand and pandemic-related supply chain disruptions that led to this shortage of semiconductors. And this is not a small problem. You can see there are reports coming out estimating what this is going to cost manufacturing companies. And for the automotive industry alone, there are numbers coming out of $210 billion in lost revenue in 2021 alone. And of course, this is dramatic and it has a big impact. So this supply chain disruption really came about, triggered by the COVID problem. So in the beginning of the COVID, there were a lot of factory shutdowns around the world, and they did not happen at the same time. It was sort of rolling and moving around. And of course, that led to a shortage of various components. It also hit the distribution networks. And then when the factories opened again and started to produce the components, then you had this logistic nightmare of the containers not being where they should be, the empty containers you need to put your cargo into to ship it around. The demand for shipping exploded, and it became a serious bottleneck. So I think we've all seen these pictures of lots of cargo ships waiting to get into harbors simply because there's no space. And the harbors are filled with containers that are not being picked up, or they're missing empty containers. So this is a really serious problem. And then on top of that, there was suddenly the Suez Canal stopped, and now there's a war in Europe. So I think there's a general feeling that these disruptions of supply chains are happening much more often than we used to. So it seems like there's something dramatic on a month scale instead of a year scale. And of course, that's going to have a long-term impact on how companies source their products, where they are manufactured, and how it's distributed in the world. But a relevant question is there anything you can do on the short term as a manufacturer? If you cannot wait until your supply network has changed, is there anything you can do to react to a sudden change in the supply of parts? And I'm going to get back to that if there's something you could do using the kind of thinking we're talking about these 3 days. But I'm going to leave it there for now, and then I'm going to go to talk about CLM and try to pinpoint what's so different about CLM. And there are different perspectives you could put on this, but there are two areas here I want to point out. I think one of the things that are different with CLM is that it offers you a new way of thinking about how you handle configurable products. And this new way of thinking is sort of captured by you talking about the definitions of your products and the configurations of your product at an appropriate level of abstractions, which we call features. So this is, it's not parts, it's not customer requirements, it's something in between called features. And these features, they can capture technical aspects that are needed for engineering and manufacturing. They can also capture more commercial aspects that are needed in dialogues with customers and finding out what are the options they want of the product. I think this is a key element because it provides a vocabulary at the right level that can be used throughout the enterprise. So it's a way to communicate between the major business functions. And we often highlight these 4 main areas in our circle that relates to engineering, sales, manufacturing, and service. But of course, if you sort of break it down, there are tons of teams throughout an enterprise that needs to work on the configuration of the products. I recall from one of our customers, they tried to count how many teams were actually working on the configuration definitions, and they found more than 700 teams in the organization that needed to work on that information. So it's really an important piece if you're doing complex products and services. And in the CLM thinking, there is this way of collaborating using this feature level. And if this is something you're interested in hearing more about, there is a presentation on Thursday by Anders Rasmussen, who is one of the founders of Configit, and he's going to talk about the relationship between bill of materials and features and how that might work together to have sort of an aligned perspective on configurable products. So this new way of thinking enables alignment throughout the phases of a product's lifecycle and across function. And another major feature I think is important in thinking CLM is that it offers a new way of collaborating. And this collaboration is based on 2 important concepts. And one is a single source of definition. So the single source of definition of what are our products, what are the capabilities, what are the options, what is it we bring to market, what can we build, and what do we want to deliver. So there's a definition of the products. And then there are a single source of configuration truth. And configuration is the configuration of each and every individual product as it goes through its life cycle. So by using these 2 key features of a new way of thinking and a new way of collaborating, we see that you have a chance of getting faster time to market. You can get better cross-functional alignment supported by systems and not just manual and informal communication. And you can get better quality assurance because you have sort of the full perspective of your product definitions available. So let me dig a bit deeper into that. And complex products, these configurable products, they have complexities in themselves. And to not make it simpler, there are a couple of very important life cycles going about these products as well. So we have these intertwined life cycles that adds to the complexity. And I want to talk a little bit about that because I think the value CLM provides is closely related to these life cycles. So I've shown this diagram grossly simplified, but still there are sort of 2 dimensions here. If you go upwards, you have indication of the life cycle of a product's definition as it goes through its life from being designed, invented, and changed. And then on the horizontal axis, you have a life cycle of an individual product's configuration. And what I'm showing here is for only one product and what's going to be one order. So it's clear that if you look into having a portfolio with hundreds, perhaps thousands of products, and you have hundreds, thousands, 10,000 of orders, you get a very complex picture. But what I've shown here first is, imagine you have a product that you want to launch to the product. It can be a new product, or it can be an updated version of a product you already have. So it goes through some workflow where you work with it, you design it, you test it out, you might do prototype builds, and then you refine it, and then you finally launch it to the market. And when it's launched, then you can start making proposals for customers to take orders on it. And this first workflow is very much sort of the engineering perspective. You change it, but it's not done in isolation by engineering, but it's very much the perspective of the engineers. And they're defining all possible variants of the product that you're bringing to market in this workflow. Then when it's out there, then you'll see you put it to market to the customers, and you start creating proposals for the product. And this is done by various sales channels, or perhaps it's self-service by customers. And the typical thing is that there will be a number of variants of this proposal being generated over time. Sometimes this can be many months, sometimes it's perhaps days, where a customer expects you'll get back with a proposal, then they might change their mind, they want something else, something more, or a sales rep convinces them they need something more, so you need an updated proposal. And whenever you do that, you're changing the configuration of the product you're offering to the customer. So you need to track that life cycle and change it. And then whenever you do that, you have to ensure that the changes you make are still within the definition you gave. So you're not going beyond what you know you can deliver to the customer. So that's important. But then, of course, what happens all the time is there's an updated version of the product. You add new capabilities, you might change what it can do, or it might be a big change that's needed by the market. There could be new regulations coming out. So you make a new version, and this is what I've indicated with the next step here. So you launch a new version of the product, and then if you have open proposals out, you have to do something about them. You probably want to make them current. So in the sales channels, you have to take that configuration in the proposal number 3, and you have to make sure it's now consistent with the new definition of the product. So you have to bring it forward. You have to make sure it's still consistent. And then you can present it to the customer, and then hopefully the customer turns it into an order, places an order, and then you have to build it. When you build it, you need to expand the configuration to all the features that are needed to drive parts and assembly processes on the shop floor. Then you deliver it to a customer. It's installed. When you're installing the product, you'll very often need to change the configuration again, because when you commission it, you'll adapt it to the environment in which the product is going to work. That's going to give you the 7th configuration of this product as it's installed. Then over the lifetime with the customer, the product will typically be maintained. So you might change something. This could be because you have to replace a part, then the configuration might change as an effect of that. Or you might have learned that there's a better way to use this product, so you can change the software and the customer will get more value out of the product. That gives you yet another configuration. Then, as time goes, there's going to be a new version of the product. It's going to be launched. So what are you going to do now? You could, of course, keep the configuration with the customer on the old version, but you could also decide to offer, or the customer could decide, I'd really like to upgrade it to what we can do today. And the upgrade could involve replacing parts, keeping other parts. It could be a pure software upgrade. It could be a mix of both. And we have customers doing all combinations of this. Then it's upgraded, you get a new version. It's basically the same product upgraded. And then again, of course, you can maintain it and change it. So this is the life of a configurable product. You will have different versions, definitions coming out. You will have a life cycle over the lifetime of the individual products, and they come together very intertwined, and you have to make sure everything works out in this scenario. And this complexity comes on top of the products in themselves having complexity due to all the different variants you have of them. So this is where CLM come to the rescue, because this is at the heart of what you want to achieve with CLM. So the first thing is that these product definitions, they correspond to solution spaces. So they are definitions of all the valid configurations of the product. And when you launch it to the market, you want valid to mean it's something we decided we want to sell, and it's something we can build and deliver. So it'll be audible. This solution space is a vehicle for collaboration between the different functions, in particular engineering and sales and marketing, because this is sort of the definition of what we have agreed to bring to market that we can build. The typical thing is that engineers, they'll still work in and prefer to work in their CAD and PLM tools, but they sort of need to get access to and relate to this joint definition of what we're going to bring to market. And this is a key in getting a successful CLM implementation. And that is that you find a way to marry up this joint definition to what the engineers are working on. And if you get this right, you can avoid that engineers spend time engineering on variants that you don't want to bring to market. You can also avoid that there are variants that are being sold, but you didn't think about how to engineer. So this is really an important part of getting a good CLM implementation. You can have sales and marketing provide suggestions for new offerings at the feature levels. So that's on the collaboration. So sales and marketing might have identified that for competitive reasons, there are new features we need to offer. And they can capture that. And what I've seen some customers doing is they take a current product, they sort of make a copy, and then they add the demand for new features. It's not engineered, it's not related, but it's sort of a blueprint to get started on. And then that's handed over to engineering. And if you do it like that, then you have a good chance of having a lot of reuse in your engineering, because a lot of it would be the same, and it's sort of highlighting what are the new requests from the market you can ensure you want to get the engineering going on. And then an important part by this way of thinking is that you can you keep track of versions. So you can support this view of the tool lifecycle I just talked about. And you can do pre-release quality assurance. So you can do an impact analysis of a change. How is it going to affect my solution space? What variants are no longer going to be useful? I could try to play the new solution space against my order bank and see if some of the orders are affected or some of the outstanding quotations are affected. And I could decide if that's something I want or not want. So there are good opportunities of ensuring quality before you release it to market. So this is sort of the CLM play on the product definition side. And then when it comes to the individual configuration, then the key here is sort of the DNA of the complex products is what we call a feature string. So this is one of the valid combinations of your solution space. And as I just talked about, it has a life cycle on its own. And there it is important that you can sort of keep versions of this configuration stored throughout the sales process. So you can get back, you can relate, you can update, get new quotations for customers. And you can use that as the basis for order fulfillment when a customer places an order. And then you need to expand it. So you have all the elements that can drive your manufacturing bill of material. And that fits naturally where the feature string is sort of the key to get to that, all the way down to the individual parts that you need and the assembly processes you need at the shop floor. Then during installation, as I talked about, it can be further adapted and updated during maintenance. And sometimes this is just software. And I'm going to talk a bit more about that later, because this is becoming more and more important, and more this is happening on a daily basis, even in our cars on our way to work. We might see there's an update that we should go for. So these are sort of the CLM play on these two life cycles. Solution spaces is a good view on the definitions. It helps you analyze and understand what you have defined. And you can use it for impact analysis, quality assurance. And then you have the individual configurations for the product over its full life cycle that you need to track, store, see how you can upgrade and change. So let me get back to the supply chain disruption and the semiconductor shortage. So how can CLM help? Is there anything CLM can do to react on the shorter term without having to wait for distribution networks to be reconfigured and change how you get that? Well, there is. And I think the key here is the transparency that CLM offers, because you have good transparency on what your product definitions are. You have transparencies on the configurations and what the effect could be. So there are a number of ways the CLM thinking could help you react quickly to a change in supply chain. Sometimes it might be pretty obvious that because there's a component we can't get, then we should probably stop offering the features that uses that component. Other times it might be more complicated, and it might affect open orders, and you might have to disappoint customers. And in order to avoid that, you might want to play through the order bank, see what's affected, and try to see if there's another configuration you can offer the customers, perhaps with a free upgrade. They might get more than they ask for, but there might be a configuration you can offer them so we don't have to disappoint them on the delivery and still get there. It can also be a more complex scenario. I mean, like the one I've depicted here. So it could be that this component, this part you can't get, is used many places. So how do you figure this out? And it's only in certain combinations. Well, what you could do is that, here's the part affected, we can't no longer get, or it'll take months before we get it. Then you could use your PLM system to try to find out what super bombs, what configurable bombs are pulling this part. Then you could look at it. You can find out when is it pulled, because in the super bomb there'll be conditions telling you when this is going to pull. You can pull that out, and that's basically a rule. And you can take that rule, you can apply it to your configuration model, you can see what the effect is going to be, and you can release it to the sales channel. And the effect of that is that you have now steered demand away from something you cannot deliver. So this is just an idea on how the CLM thinking might help you react very quickly to changes in the supply chain, while you might wait for the more long-term solutions to the problem. With that, I'm going to move to a different topic. I'm going to talk about CLM and sustainability. And you might ask, this sustainability is a big topic on the agenda throughout the world, and does CLM have a play here? And I want to talk about that with 3 examples of how CLM might be used to deliver on the sustainability agenda. And my first example is Vestas wind turbines. They were just announced the most sustainable company in the world in an international ranking made, and they came out as number 1. So they're definitely thinking about sustainability, both in the products they deliver, which are wind turbines generating clean energy, but also in the processes they use internally and how they work. And they use CLM thinking in a number of areas, and I've pulled out a couple here. One is that they use the life cycle of the individual configurations when they commission a new wind turbine. So when you have to commission it, you have to set the driving parameters in the software according to the hardware and to the location where you put the wind turbine, and local regulations on noise and a few other things. They use CLM thinking, a solutions-based approach, and this life cycle of the configurations to make sure they get that right. So every wind turbine from Vestas in the world is configured with this way of thinking. They also use it in selling power plants. And today power plants is a wind farm with wind turbines. It could also be solar panels as part of it. And it can be a lot of complicated electrical equipment to support the power generation. And they also do that with a CLM way of thinking. So the things are linked internally. Here they also have a very interesting life cycle, because when you do a quotation for a power plant with wind turbines, the lifetime of just going through the quotation process can be years. So of course, during that period, you have new innovations in your product, and you might want to utilize that in your offer to the customer. So you have to upgrade your quotation over the years to make the best fit for the customer and what you can currently offer. The second example is is a very fascinating organization called Nordic Swan Ecolabel, and they certify on sustainability. And one of the things I really like about the approach with this certification is that it's the full life cycle of the products. So it's not just whether the product is going to hurt you because there's nasty stuff in it, but it's also how the companies producing it are taking care of waste and production and a lot of issues. And you might ask, what does a certification authority have to do with CLM? Well, the fascinating thing is that they use this way of thinking in managing the life cycle. So they have rules saying when you can get certified. These rules change over time. It becomes more and more difficult to get the certification, and this is of course to enforce more and more sustainability. So the rules change over time. They use CLM thinking to define that solution space of when can you get something certified. And they also do it for the individual products. There are variants of a washing machine that might get the label. There might be other variants that cannot get the label. They control that with CLM thinking. There's a very nice webinar that was done recently that if you're interested, you can find in our archive where they're explaining how they go about this. And then the third one is Jaguar Land Rover. There's going to be a presentation after the break by Alec Crawford from JLR talking about how they're using CLM thinking. The thing I want to highlight here is that I think they made a very bold announcement saying from 2025, all their cars are going to be electric. That's a huge change. Normally, before you start thinking of a new product range until it hits the market, it's like 7 years. So this is a very aggressive plan. And they explained to us that one of the reasons they can move fast on new product variants is because through CLM thinking, they now have a very efficient way of making new product variants, new options, and launching it to the market. So I'm sure Alec is going to talk a bit about that after the break. And I want to point to the panel discussion at the end of the session today, where there's going to be discussion on green configuration. That leads me to looking ahead. Everything I've talked about so far is what's already going on, what's happening with CLM. So let's have a glimpse of what might be coming. And in order to talk about that, I want to pinpoint 3 trends we see going on in the manufacturing businesses. So the first trend I want to talk about is enterprise-level automation across functions. So at the heart of this is really breaking down the silos between different functions in an organization and making sure they work efficiently together. This could, for instance, be between sales, marketing, and engineering. So if you're a company where you need to deliver 2D drawings as part of your proposal for a customer, this typically involves the sales rep having to go to a back office, engineering office, and have them generate the drawing. But there's a way to automate that. So the engineers have more time for innovating and designing products, and sales can much more quickly get back with proposals for the customers, and this is called design automation. And there's going to be more on that on Thursday. There's going to be a session on how you might do design automation in a CLM setting. But it's a big topic, and our thinking is this is a trend we are going to keep an eye on. We're going to see how we might help companies deliver on this agenda of having better automation across functions. The second one I want to talk about is digital end-to-end experiences for customers and employees. And during the presentation tomorrow, there's going to be more about the customer side, but it's important for me to point out that this is also about the employees. So if you want to have an efficient organization executing at high speed without mistakes, then it's important also the employees have a consistent picture of the products end to end. So it's not only for customers, but also for the employees, you have to think about digital end-to-end experience. And this is a trend that's pointed out in surveys asking manufacturing companies what's on the agenda. This is a topic very high up. They're thinking about how to support that. A third trend is digitalization of products. This is, of course, a major trend that's been going on for years. And this time I picked, normally you pick a Tesla or something like that, but I picked a Mercedes, a new one coming out, EQS. And I think if you look at the picture from the interior, the thing that's just screaming in your face is this is now looking very much like an IT gadget. Big screens, lots of digital stuff going on, LED lighting, you can change and flash and change to your mood and whatnot. This is something that's really going on. It's not only in cars, it's all over the place in industrial equipment and components. So you've got to have a response to that. How are we going to handle that? And it's not only in products, but it's also the services that comes with it. And some products are being now delivered as services. So how are we going to handle that? And the way we work with developing our products and our offering is that we keep an eye on this trend. We have a different way of sourcing information from analysts. We have our own advisory boards. We look into the projects we run, and we try to pick up what seems to be important and on the agenda for the manufacturing companies we work with. And we use that in prioritizing what we're investing in. And we're definitely investing in supporting these three trends. And if we take the enterprise level automation across functions, well, it's sort of at the heart of the CLM thinking. And the important key element here is this single source of definition truth. So everybody see the same view on what products we are defining and bringing to market. And I'm excited to see that we are bringing out some new capabilities with Configit ACE in the upcoming release in this area that will help optimize on the engineering efforts. So there's something on system level configuration, which there'll be a presentation on Thursday. There's something on design automation I already mentioned. And I think these are new capabilities that can help deliver on this agenda of automating across functions. There are also some new integration capabilities that will make it easier to do real-time integrations between ACE and other enterprise systems. On the end-to-end experiences, the key thing here is the single source of configuration truth. So having this feature string that links it together. So you might have a nice visual experience, but this is only showing some elements of the product. If you have to turn it into an order, you need to know the details all the way down to the parts level. And with CLM thinking, you can link this together and still have the appealing visual experience. And there's going to be some interesting presentations on that over the coming days, how you might do that in a CLM thinking. And for the third one, digitalization of products, well, this play into both sort of the life cycle of the definitions and the configurations. For one thing, you're going to have a lot more upgrades of your products, typically when there's more software in them. So you've got to find a way to handle that. It could also be in the service part, as I briefly mentioned on the wind turbines, when you commission them or change the configuration. And there's some interesting new capability coming out with ACE, which is to do with offline. So you might have a configurator running without being online to the internet while you're doing it. So with that, I get to my conclusion, and I think it's fair to say that there is some game-changing stuff going on with CLM, and it enables the trends I talked about, and it's driving values in different dimensions. So there is an opportunity to drive revenue by having faster time to market. And two aspects of that I want to point out is that you can bring the complete product portfolio available in all sales channels on a timely manner. And if you don't use this kind of CLM thinking, I've heard stories about this annoying problem that your product is ready for launch, but your configurator is not, your software is not, so it's hard to sell it. This, of course, is an unfortunate situation, and if you use a CLM thinking, you'll avoid that. You can respond quickly to changes, for instance, in supply chain. You'll also be able to drive revenue by having engaging digital customer experiences, for instance, with the visual part, but also making sure that customers can use different touch points and they all see the same with respect to the product they're ordering or have already ordered. You can quickly respond to customer requests, which of course is a competitive factor in getting more revenue. You can reduce cost by empowering the sales to create complex quotations, avoid inefficiency and rework due to misunderstandings, and you can mitigate risk by having all functions being aligned on the product definitions, which is a major risk reducer. And that also links to not having configuration errors in manufacturing. And we have customers stating they basically eliminated misbuilds due to configuration errors after having used the CLM way of thinking. And you have a chance to validate changes and see the impact before you release it to downstream systems, which is also mitigating your risk. So with that, I'll finish my presentation and thank you for your attention.